This is the story of Fenris, Helir, and the Svenson clan. A tale woven by true events. Once upon a golden beltane, the crew of the Fenris Helir was to travel many a mile to attend the glorious celebration. Captain Tyrvalder, Lady Sigrun, and her son Dirty Sleeves arrived in good time ahead of the rest of the crew. They chose the perfect spot on the grassy green meadow to set up camp. It was a beautiful sight indeed, and as chance would have it, belonged to part of the territory of a local clan. The clan swiftly decided that such an act of disrespect would not go unanswered. That night, as Tyr slept under his furs, the clan's leader crept into his bedchamber. The menacing figure loomed over Tyr, and just as he was about to strike, Tyr sprang up from his bed and with a mighty blow struck down his attacker, leaving his corpse to cool at the foot of his bed. The next morning, Tyr recounted his midnight scuffle to Sigrun and Dirty Sleeves. Being the great warrior that he was, Tyr was not disturbed by this encounter. Unbeknownst to him, this would be the beginning of a blood feud. Later that day, a woman approached camp with a distressed look upon her face. And since the Fenris are kind and welcoming hosts, they bade her come in, sit at our fire, and share a bowl of broth. They inquired, "What troubles thee?" And she replied that she was searching for the whereabouts of her husband Sven. As she went on to describe Sven, it became apparent that this woman, Svetlana, was the wife of none other than last night's attacker. Following the delivery of the news that her husband was dead on the captain's floor, she became enraged. Fueled by grief, she lunged forth at the captain, attempting to avenge Sven's death. But Tyr, in self-defense, dispatched her as easily as one would squash a bug. Svetlana joined her beloved husband on the floor of Tyr's bedchamber. On the third day, the rest of the crew arrived with a joyous affair. Casts of ale were broken open as they all smiled and embraced each other, whilst discussing the details of their long journey. Though Tyr and Sigrun had agreed to speak not of what had occurred. For why soil such a splendid celebration with trivial events? Though their intentions were honorable, the two had incorrectly assumed that the murderous events had come to an end. Over the next few days, the Fenris camp was besieged by the Svenson clan. Brothers, uncles, cousins of Sven delivered attack after attack. But each time, the Fenris Helir was able to smite their enemies. However, when the onslaught of violence reached an intolerable level, the crew became suspicious that these attacks were not without reason. Tyr and Sigrun were forced to divulge that they may have killed, in self-defense, the local clan leader and his wife. "But why didst thou not tell us?" asked the very handsome Ivar Lawgripper. The crew had a long laugh as they found it quite humorous, as Tyr and Sigrun explained their previous predicament. Now, the illustrious Lady Alana, Tyr's consort, was traveling from the distant land of Kaid to meet Tyrvalder at Golden Beltane for the remainder of the festival. Due to arrive the next morning, the crew reminded Tyr that Lady Alana would be quite displeased to find two corpses in their bedchamber. Although they may have been enemies, out of respect for the dead, the crew built a large pyre on which to burn their bodies. That night, they drank and laughed and sang in the firelight. And as the dawn peaked, cooling the last embers, Tyr discreetly buried the bones for not a soul to find. Then, there was Olaf, youngest son of Sven. Olaf the Leaper appeared crouched on the dining table, frightening young Dirty Sleeves. He let out a terrified shout, calling Tyr's attention. Olaf reared back and charged at Dirty Sleeves, but Tyr cunningly threw the tablecloth over Olaf's head and proceeded to pummel him with his fists. Olaf freed himself from the cloth, and true to his namesake, leapt over Tyr, bound up the encampment walls, and ran off into the distance, leaving Tyr wrestling with an empty piece of fabric. Olaf had escaped, and the crew warily awaited his imminent return, keeping watch throughout the night. And so they waited, but no attack came. And after a time, Fenris relaxed and took pleasure in Beltane festivities. They jumped over bonfires, they played games, and of course, spent a few evenings at the Cock and Bulls Tavern. Though they kept a watchful eye out for any rogue Svensons. Without further affliction, Golden Beltane came to a close. The fires had been snuffed, the maypole had been danced, the young couples had returned after a long night in the forest. It was time to pack up and shove off. But before they boarded their ships, Tyr had a beautiful gift for his crew. He presented them with the skull of their enemy, Sven. Tyr had removed the skull and stowed it away for this very purpose. After exchanging knowing glances, the crew placed Sven's skull in the fire pit, thus deciding his eternal resting place. But if you have visited our camp, you may have noticed that there are 2 skulls in our fire pits. After 2 years had passed, amidst the squiring ceremony of Tyr and Claiborne, Duchess Mariah and Duke Christopher presented Fenris with yet another skull, that of Svetlana. Tyr and Claiborne swore fealty to the Duke and Duchess, and they in turn swore to share the abundance of their harvest and the warmth of their mead hall. By laying the skull of their enemy at their feet, the Duke and Duchess gifted them with a symbol of their promise to protect and defend the Fenris Helir. The crew was touched by the thoughtfulness and fierce loyalty. Though, as the wise Lady Rose pondered later, we never did disclose where we buried the bones. As for the rest of the Svenson clan, only once have they paid us a visit. One day, Lady Sigrun found a young boy, probably the grandchild of Sven, on her doorstep. He trembled as he proclaimed to seek revenge against those wolves-carrying guys. Instead of taking his life, she gave him an option. She said, "Presently I must go, but if thou be here when I return, by my word, it will be your death." And so she bid him good day and departed to the marketplace. When she returned much later, along with her friend Lady Eddie, they found him cowering in the corner of her room. Sigrun may have been merciful, but Lady Eddie's not. Wielding a large cooking pan, she bashed his small skull in, killing him instantly. And we have seen neither hide nor tail of any other Svensons. Since that Golden Beltane, many have warmed themselves at our fires, and many have wondered about the skull in our fire pit. Our bards tell them our story, and we explain that we keep Sven there as a warning to Olaf, should he ever return to avenge the death of his father. We can point at Sven and say, "Think carefully, young Olaf, for this is the fate of those who quarrel with the Fenris Helir." And thus concludes the tale of our epic battle with a family of spiders.